When we speak about connection, most people immediately think of conversation, of what is said, what is promised, and what is confessed. But the deepest connections between two souls are rarely formed through words. Words are only the surface of understanding. Beneath them lies the true current of presence, something that cannot be explained, yet can be felt in every breath, every glance, every still moment shared between two people. When a man feels deeply connected to a woman, it is not the sentences exchanged that build this bond, it is the quiet recognition that exists even in silence. Presence becomes the language, and in that language, everything real is said without sound. There are moments when he sits beside her and does not need to speak. The world outside continues in its rush, cars passing, phones buzzing, people talking. But within that silence, there is a space that belongs only to them. In that space, his mind softens. The noise inside him begins to fade. He no longer feels the pressure to perform, to prove, or to be seen a certain way. He simply is. And that simple being, shared with another, becomes sacred. Presence turns into communication more profound than any spoken expression could ever reach. A man spends much of his life being taught that words define his worth. He learns to persuade, to explain, to defend. Yet when he meets someone with whom he feels deeply connected, he begins to understand that presence is stronger than persuasion. He starts to sense that true intimacy is not about constant reassurance, but about energetic alignment. When he is in her presence, he can rest from the endless inner dialogue that always demands he be something. The silence between them does not feel empty. It feels alive. To be present beyond words means to feel seen without the need to perform identity. A man does not have to speak his fears to be understood. His energy reveals them. He does not have to tell his story to be accepted. His essence is already recognized. This kind of connection goes beyond the ordinary idea of love. It becomes a mirror that reflects both the light and the shadow within him. And in that reflection, he feels peace. The woman who can hold space for his silence gives him something the world rarely offers: the freedom to just be human. Presence beyond words is not passive. It requires awareness. It asks for stillness, for attention, without judgment. A man feels when someone's energy is scattered, when they are hearing him but not feeling him. But when a woman is grounded in her own awareness, when her mind is quiet and her heart is open, she becomes a mirror that reflects his true self without distortion. He feels her presence not as something that demands, but as something that receives. And in that receiving, he discovers that his strength does not come from control, but from surrender. In this kind of connection, the boundaries between masculine and feminine energy dissolve. Presence becomes the bridge that unites both polarities. He brings stillness, she brings flow. He holds the structure, she brings breath. Yet within that balance, neither dominates, both merge into something timeless. When he looks at her, he does not see a role or an expectation. He sees an energy that feels like home. And home is not a place, it is a presence where the soul no longer needs to search. Often, a man will find it difficult to describe what he feels in such a bond. If asked, he may only say, "I feel calm around her." But that calmness is not simple. It is the rare silence that dissolves inner turbulence. It is the experience of being understood without analysis. It is the comfort of knowing that no matter how chaotic life becomes, there exists a space, her presence, where everything returns to order. To him, this calm feels like truth. In presence, time slows. Breathing synchronizes. There is no urgency to define, no pressure to control the outcome. The energy exchanged in those moments nourishes both. She might not realize it, but her awareness, her ability to simply be there, becomes a medicine for his restless mind. When she listens not just to his words, but to the pauses between them, he feels accepted in his wholeness. That acceptance invites him deeper into himself. He begins to express emotions he once buried, not because she asked for them, but because her energy allows them to rise safely. Presence beyond words is the purest form of connection because it does not depend on circumstance. It can exist even across distance. When two energies are attuned, they do not need physical closeness to remain connected. He can think of her and feel her presence like a subtle warmth in his chest. The energy remains alive, even in absence, because it was never built on conversation alone. It was built on vibration. This is why the most powerful connections are often quiet. They are not loud declarations. They are not constant communication. They live in subtle moments. The way eyes meet without explanation, The way energy softens in proximity, the way two people can share silence without it feeling uncomfortable. In such silence, something sacred unfolds. Awareness deepens. The outer world fades, and what remains is the essence of two beings who have remembered how to be together, not just talk about being together. Presence, beyond words, teaches that love is not only an emotion. It is a state of awareness. It is a conscious act of being with someone fully, without needing to change or fix them. When a man feels this kind of presence, he no longer chases affection. He rests in connection. He stops searching for validation because he has already found understanding. In that presence, there are no promises to make, no explanations to give, no roles to perform. Only being, only awareness, only the quiet truth that sometimes the most honest form of love is silence shared between two souls who have learned to see each other without words. When a man truly connects with someone on a deeper level, a quiet transformation begins within him. It is not loud or visible to the outside world. It happens beneath the layers of his strength, behind the practiced expressions that society has taught him to wear. For much of his life, he is conditioned to believe that vulnerability is a weakness, that showing emotion, expressing uncertainty, or revealing pain makes him less of a man. So he learns to hide it. He builds walls out of composure and silence, not because he doesn't feel, but because he feels too deeply and has never been given permission to show it. But when he meets someone who sees beyond his surface, when he senses safety in her energy, those walls begin to soften. The armor he once believed necessary starts to crack, not from damage, but from trust. Vulnerability without fear is not about exposing oneself to anyone. It is the sacred act of opening to someone who has created an environment where openness feels natural. When a man feels deeply connected, he begins to reveal parts of himself he has long kept in shadow. Not because he plans to, but because her presence draws it out of him. Her calm energy tells him, "You are safe here." And those words do not need to be spoken. They are felt. In that safety, he no longer feels the need to perform strength. He begins to understand that being real is far more powerful than being perfect. A man who allows himself to be vulnerable is not losing his power, he is rediscovering it. His true strength is not measured by how much he can suppress, but by how courageously he can share his truth. In a world that constantly tells him to harden, the act of softening becomes an act of rebellion. The moment he realizes that his emotions do not make him fragile but human, he starts to breathe differently. The heaviness that once sat on his chest begins to lift. He learns that vulnerability is not something to fear. It is a doorway to freedom. Vulnerability without fear requires presence from both sides. For a man to open, he must sense that his openness will not be used against him. Many men carry memories of being misunderstood when they showed their true feelings. Some were told to man up when they cried, or ignored when they expressed confusion or sadness. So they learned that silence is safer than honesty. But in the presence of someone who listens without judgment, that old conditioning starts to unravel. Her stillness, her patience, her willingness to hold space without needing to fix him. All of it invites him to lower his guard. He begins to trust the space more than his fear. When a man feels deeply connected, his vulnerability shifts from being a threat to being a bridge. Through it, he begins to communicate in a new language, one of authenticity. He doesn't need to pretend to have the answers. He doesn't need to hide his confusion or pretend to always be in control. He can admit that he feels lost sometimes, that he carries scars, that he fears not being enough. In doing so, he stops fighting against himself. The woman who can witness that without trying to change it gives him something no one else can. The permission to exist as he truly is. In this space of vulnerability, a man's energy becomes transparent. You can feel the sincerity in his silence, the tenderness in his tone, the honesty in his gaze. He may not use many words, but his presence says everything. He no longer hides behind strength, he embodies it. Because strength, when stripped of ego, becomes gentleness, and gentleness, when guided by truth, becomes magnetic. This is the paradox of vulnerability. The softer he becomes, the stronger his connection grows. There is also a subtle shift in how he views love. Before connection, love might have been about attraction, excitement, or validation. But once he experiences vulnerability without fear, love becomes a sanctuary. It becomes the space where he can be seen in his rawness and still be accepted. That acceptance changes everything. It softens the rigid parts of him that he thought he needed to protect. It turns defense into trust, tension into flow. He realizes that he does not need to earn love by performing. He only needs to be, and that realization allows him to give love more freely, more fully, more consciously. To be vulnerable without fear is to stand unclothed before another soul, not in the physical sense, but in the emotional sense, without masks, without control, without pretending to be more or less than what he is. It is the experience of letting another person see the truth beneath the layers. Sometimes that truth is beautiful, sometimes it is painful, but it is always real. The man who can exist in that state discovers something rare: peace. Because the energy once spent maintaining an image is now available for connection. In that openness, his energy becomes calm, his body relaxes, his breath deepens. He no longer lives in the tension between who he is and who he pretends to be. He can laugh more genuinely, speak more honestly, and love more consciously. The fear that used to accompany his emotions fades because it has been replaced by understanding. When she looks at him, she doesn't see weakness in his tears or confusion in his silence. She sees courage in his willingness to feel. And that reflection gives him strength to go deeper. Vulnerability without fear does not happen overnight. It unfolds gradually, moment by moment, trust by trust. It is a dance of openness and presence. When a man feels safe enough to expose his inner world, he begins to experience love not as dependency, but as mutual awareness. He learns that the more he reveals, the less he has to hide. The less he hides, the lighter his soul becomes. And the lighter he feels, the more authentic his connection grows. It is through this vulnerability that the deepest form of intimacy is born, not from words, not from desire, but from the courage to be seen completely. When a man reaches this space, his connection transforms from something emotional to something spiritual. It becomes a shared stillness, two energies intertwining in truth, without masks, without expectations. Without fear, there is a silence that speaks louder than affection, a peace that comes not from being alone, but from being understood. When a man feels deeply connected to someone, there awakens within him a sense of stillness that he has not known before. It is not the stillness of emptiness or disinterest. It is the stillness of belonging. It is the quiet awareness that he no longer has to search, no longer has to prove, no longer has to wear any mask to be accepted. It is the stillness that rises when the soul finally finds a place where it can rest without fear of judgment. For much of his life, a man's energy is in movement. He moves toward goals, toward success, toward responsibility, toward the next task that keeps him useful and valued. He is often measured by what he does, rarely by what he feels. And so, he learns to carry his world within, his pain, his dreams, his disappointments, hidden behind a calm exterior. Yet, even the strongest ones grow weary from constant motion. Beneath his discipline and composure lies a quiet yearning to find someone beside whom his inner world can slow down, where the restless energy of proving himself can dissolve into the gentle rhythm of simply being. That yearning is not for admiration, it is for belonging. Belonging does not come from possession or promises. It is not achieved by effort. It arrives when he encounters a space, often within another person's presence, where his mind feels no need to protect or perform. When she looks at him without expectation, when she listens without interruption, when her presence holds more peace than demand, something inside him exhales. That exhale is the beginning of stillness. It is the soul's recognition that it has found resonance in another being. In the stillness of belonging, there are no conditions. He does not need to be strong every moment, nor charming, nor confident. He does not have to be the unshakable one, the one who always has answers. In that stillness, he can simply be. The masks that the world requires fall away like leaves from a tree. There is no performance, no defense, only quiet authenticity. And in that quiet, he begins to rediscover himself. He feels emotions he once ignored, sees beauty in simplicity, and finds safety in presence. It is not a loud safety, it is gentle, invisible, and deeply grounding. Stillness is not the absence of energy, it is its alignment. When a man feels he belongs, his energy no longer fights against itself. His heart, mind, and body move in the same rhythm. He no longer feels pulled between what he feels and what he is supposed to feel. The woman who brings this sense of belonging does not control him, she frees him. Her energy does not demand his attention, it welcomes his essence. Around her, he feels no pressure to be more or less than he is. Her stillness becomes a mirror that reflects back to him the peace he forgot he carried. The stillness of belonging cannot be fabricated or forced. It arises naturally when two energies recognize one another beyond words. It is not chemistry built on desire alone, it is connection built on awareness. He might not even understand why he feels so calm in her presence. Only that he does, and in that calm, he begins to trust. Trust is not a decision here, it is a vibration. His body knows it before his mind can explain it. His breathing slows. His heartbeat steadies. The noise of the world fades into the background, and what remains is presence, pure, unspoken healing presence. Belonging is the opposite of loneliness, but not because it fills an emptiness. It removes the illusion that he was ever separate. When he feels truly seen, the walls of isolation crumble. He realizes that connection is not about losing independence, but about finding resonance. It is not about merging completely, but about aligning frequencies. Two energies, distinct yet harmonized, existing together in a shared stillness that does not need to be defined. In that space, love becomes less of an emotion and more of a natural state of awareness. In the stillness of belonging, he no longer feels the need to escape himself. He no longer fears the silence between conversations or the quiet after laughter. Silence becomes comfort, not discomfort. Presence becomes nourishment, not pressure. Every shared moment, a look, a pause, a breath, feels complete in itself. There is no reaching, no chasing, no grasping, only existing. This is the depth that words cannot create. It is the silent knowing that he is accepted as he is, without needing to earn that acceptance through constant effort. This stillness is not fragile. It does not break with distance or time. It is a connection that transcends both. Even when she is not there, her energy lingers, not as a memory, but as a frequency that his being remembers. The peace she awakens in him becomes his own. This is the sacred paradox of belonging. The more he feels it, the less dependent he becomes. It does not bind him, it grounds him. He does not cling to her for identity. Instead, he expands into his own. Because the essence of belonging is not possession, but freedom through connection. In that freedom, his perception of love shifts. Love is no longer about intensity or drama. It becomes about stillness and depth, the quiet understanding that he can face the storms of life and still feel anchored, because somewhere within or beyond him, there exists a space of peace that no chaos can reach. He carries that stillness into his actions, into his relationships, into his work. It begins to shape how he listens, how he moves, how he breathes. He becomes calmer, more centered, more aware. This is what belonging does. It doesn't change who he is, it reveals who was before fear entered. And so, the stillness of belonging becomes the most powerful form of connection he can experience. It is not about grand gestures or constant reassurances. It is about an energy that remains, an unspoken understanding that persists even in silence. It is the space where the masculine finds peace in the presence of the feminine, where action finds rest in awareness, where the mind finds harmony in the heart. It is not something that can be captured by words, only felt through stillness. The stillness that says, without needing to speak, "You belong here, air." There is a sacred moment between two people that cannot be planned or predicted. A quiet yet powerful instant where both souls recognize something familiar in the other. It is not about appearance, voice, or behavior. It is something much deeper, something that vibrates beneath the surface of identity. This is the energy of mutual recognition. It is when two energies meet and remember that they have known each other long before the mind could understand why. It feels like recognition without reason, comfort without explanation, closeness without history. When a man experiences this kind of connection, it awakens a profound awareness in him, one that goes beyond attraction or affection. It feels like his energy has found its mirror. Most of the time, people meet through the surface, through the mind, through words, through impressions. But true recognition does not happen in the mind. It happens in the subtle field that surrounds two beings, the field of presence. Before a word is spoken, before a thought is formed, energy has already begun to communicate. When there is mutual recognition, both souls sense it simultaneously. There is a magnetic quiet between them, a sense of being seen in a way that the world rarely offers. The body might relax. The breath might deepen. The usual guard that people carry unconsciously begins to lower. Nothing needs to be proven or explained because the energy itself has already said, "I know you." For a man, This kind of recognition feels both powerful and unsettling. He may not understand it logically, but he feels it viscerally. It is not infatuation, it is remembrance. There is something in her energy that feels like a home he forgot existed. Her presence touches something ancient in him, a part of his being that has waited to be met with equal awareness. It is not about similarity in interests or background. It is about resonance. When energies resonate, there is harmony without effort. Words flow easily. Silence feels safe. Time becomes irrelevant. Everything feels naturally aligned. Mutual recognition is not always loud or dramatic. Often, it is subtle, a quiet knowing that unfolds with stillness. When he looks into her eyes, he senses depth rather than mystery, clarity rather than confusion. It is not the curiosity of wanting to figure her out. It is the peace of finally understanding without needing to analyze. That recognition softens him. It dissolves the invisible armor he carries, the armor of performance, pride, and protection. In that dissolution, what remains is essence meeting essence. Energy of mutual recognition is not created by effort, it is revealed through awareness. When two people are fully present, their energies can meet without interference. But most people live distracted. Buried in thoughts, expectations, or emotional noise, they cannot feel beyond the mind. Yet, when both individuals are conscious, when both are awake in the moment, recognition becomes inevitable. Their awareness touches, and in that touch, something eternal awakens. For the man, this becomes a moment of truth. He realizes that connection is not something to pursue, but something to allow. It happens naturally when two energies are aligned in openness. This recognition also carries a sense of humility. He understands that he is not in control of it. He cannot force it or replicate it. It is not about choice, it is about resonance. Just as two notes of the same frequency vibrate together in harmony, two conscious beings vibrate in synchrony when they meet on the same level of awareness. It is not about possession or attachment. It is about remembrance and reflection. She becomes a mirror not of his image, but of his essence. When he sees himself through her presence, he begins to see who he truly is beneath the stories and expectations. The beauty of mutual recognition lies in its silence. It does not require words to confirm its existence. It can happen in a glance, in a shared pause, in the unspoken comfort of being. When energies meet in truth, communication transcends sound. A look becomes a language. A breath becomes a message. Every subtle gesture carries meaning, yet nothing feels heavy. There is no pressure to define or label what is happening because the awareness itself is enough. The connection does not depend on explanations, it exists before explanation. For the man who feels this, it becomes a transformative experience. It changes the way he perceives love and connection. He no longer looks for external validation because he has touched something internal that feels complete. Recognition reminds him that real connection is not built, it is revealed. It is the meeting of two souls who no longer pretend, who no longer hide, who no longer fear being seen. The energy between them feels balanced, not because it is perfect, but because it is real. In this kind of connection, there is also reflection of polarity. The dance between the masculine and feminine. His stillness recognizes her flow. Her intuition recognizes his groundedness. Her openness calls forth his depth. His presence strengthens her softness. It is not a battle of energies, but a harmony of them. Each sees in the other what they have forgotten in themselves. She reflects his sensitivity. He reflects her strength. Together, their awareness amplifies. The recognition becomes a catalyst for growth, a mirror that reveals both their beauty and their unhealed parts. This energy of mutual recognition is sacred because it dissolves illusions. It strips away the mask people wear to be loved. In that space, everything falls silent. Only authenticity remains. The man realizes that what he was searching for was never outside of him. It was this resonance, this truth, this deep remembrance of who he is when he stands before someone who sees him completely. That is why such connections are rare. They require both souls to be awake enough to recognize themselves in the other. When he experiences this recognition, he carries it within him. Even if circumstances change, even if paths diverge, the energy remains. Because once two energies truly recognize each other, they imprint beyond time. The lesson stays, the memory of that clarity, that peace, that awakening of the heart, it becomes a part of him. It teaches him to seek not attachment but alignment, not possession but presence, not noise but resonance. In the energy of mutual recognition, two beings do not meet by chance. They meet because they are ready to remember, ready to reflect, ready to see. What begins as a spark of connection becomes a quiet awareness that transforms how he experiences every other moment of his life. Because once you have felt what it means to be truly recognized, everything less than that feels like noise. There are emotions that do not need to be spoken aloud for them to be understood. Energies that express more through silence than words ever could. Gratitude is one of them. But there exists a deeper layer within it, a kind of unspoken gratitude that arises not from courtesy or habit, but from the quiet recognition of how another person's presence has shifted something within the soul. When a man feels deeply connected to a woman, he may not always articulate his appreciation in words, yet his energy changes in her presence. The stillness in his behavior, the softness in his eyes, the peace in his breathing, all become the language through which this gratitude speaks. Unspoken gratitude is not the same as verbal acknowledgement. Words of thanks can be sincere, but they often carry the structure of politeness. True gratitude exists before the mind finds language for it. It is an energy that flows from awareness of how someone's presence has touched, healed, or awakened something inside you. For a man who has long lived with the weight of silent burdens, to suddenly feel seen without needing to explain himself is a profound experience. He might not have the vocabulary to describe it, but within him, something bows in reverence. This silent reverence is gratitude in its purest form. When a man feels understood beyond his words, appreciated not for what he does but for who he is, he begins to carry a quiet appreciation that lingers even in her absence. He may not announce it, he may not always say, "Thank you." But his actions start to reflect it. The way he listens more attentively, the way he becomes gentler, the way he chooses peace over pride. Gratitude becomes woven into his presence, into the subtleties of how he shows up. It lives in his stillness, not in his speech. Unspoken gratitude arises when the soul recognizes nourishment, when her energy brings him balance, when her calm brings him clarity, when her compassion softens his guarded edges. Something within him begins to relax. That relaxation itself is gratitude. It is the soul's sigh of relief, finally being allowed to breathe. He may not consciously think of it as thankfulness, but every cell in his body remembers how it feels to be at ease, to be seen without judgment. That ease becomes the quiet way he honors her presence. Gratitude that is spoken can fade, it belongs to moments. Gratitude that is unspoken endures, it belongs to essence. It does not depend on circumstances or words exchanged. Even when distance or silence separates two people, that energy remains. Because unspoken gratitude is not about what was given or received, it is about what was awakened. When he thinks of her, not out of longing but out of appreciation for what she brought to his awareness, that is gratitude. She may never hear it, but the universe does. Energy never hides what is real. For many men, expressing deep emotions openly is not something they were taught. The world rewards strength, composure, and control, but it rarely encourages vulnerability or tenderness. So gratitude often remains internal, an emotion felt rather than displayed. But that does not make it any less powerful. In fact, its silence gives it depth. Because it is not spoken for validation, it exists purely for acknowledgement. It is an internal bow of the spirit, one that says, "That's why I've been changed because of this connection." This unspoken gratitude transforms how he perceives connection itself. He no longer looks at relationships as transactions of attention or affection. He begins to see them as sacred exchanges of energy. He realizes that the people who touch us deeply are not accidents, they are mirrors sent by life to reveal something hidden within us. And when he feels that truth, the gratitude he carries transcends emotion. It becomes awareness. Awareness of how presence can heal, how understanding can soften, how love can expand consciousness without a single word being said. There is a particular peace that lives inside gratitude like this. It humbles the heart, it softens the ego. It silences the mind's complaints. When a man stands in that space, he no longer needs constant affirmation. He knows that the connection was meaningful, that it added something valuable to his inner growth. He does not measure it by outcome or permanence. Gratitude teaches him that even brief connections can leave eternal imprints. Even moments can awaken lifetimes of wisdom. When he looks at her, he might not say much, but his eyes carry a quiet depth, the kind that can only come from appreciation unspoken. The warmth in his energy, the gentleness in his gestures, the peace that surrounds him in her presence. All are silent forms of thank you. He may not always articulate it because the feeling itself is too vast for words. Some emotions are meant to be lived, not described. Gratitude is one of them. Unspoken gratitude also reveals his emotional maturity. Instead of expressing love through promises or declarations, he begins to express it through awareness, being more patient, more mindful, more attentive. He understands that to be grateful is to be conscious of value, and to be conscious of value is to live with reverence. Gratitude shifts him from desire to devotion, from wanting to appreciating. It becomes less about having her and more about us honoring her existence. That quiet reverence is something she can feel, even if it is never voiced. There is beauty in such restraint. When gratitude is not expressed through words, it is expressed through energy, through the way his presence feels lighter, through the way he carries peace rather than tension, through the way he treats the world around him with more tenderness. Her influence becomes a vibration in him, and though he may never say it, the universe reads it clearly. Because energy does not need sound to communicate truth, in that quiet field of appreciation, something sacred grows, awareness that life itself is a teacher and every soul that enters it carries a lesson. He begins to recognize that what she awakened in him was not just emotion, but consciousness. She reminded him of his capacity to feel, to trust, to soften. And even if paths diverge, that awareness stays. It becomes part of his essence, part of his stillness. Every time he breathes with clarity, every time he responds with kindness instead of reaction, that unspoken gratitude lives through him. To be grateful without words is to live in quiet reverence for what has been shared. It is to understand that presence itself was the gift. When a man reaches this level of awareness, gratitude becomes his natural state, not something to express, but something to embody. It flows through his being like a silent river, connecting him not only to the one he cherishes, but to life itself. His heart beats with the memory of that connection, and though he may never speak of it, his energy will forever carry the vibration of thankfulness that no language can contain. In a world that teaches men to be firm, decisive, and unshakable, softness is often mistaken for weakness. From a young age, many are conditioned to believe that power means control, that composure means suppression, and that emotion is something to be managed rather than experienced. But there comes a moment, often when he encounters a connection that feels real, deep, and grounding, when this definition of strength begins to unravel. Through her presence, through her calmness and understanding, he begins to experience a different kind of power, the power that comes from softness. This softness does not strip him of his strength, it refines it. It turns force into flow, reaction into awareness, and self-protection into self-acceptance. Transformation through softness begins in subtle ways. It is not a dramatic collapse of the old self, but a gradual melting of layers that have been built over years of survival. When a man feels deeply connected, he begins to notice that he no longer needs to meet life with resistance. He starts to sense that openness brings him more clarity than defense ever did. The woman who embodies softness does not need to push, demand, or prove. Her energy itself is an invitation, a reminder that peace is more powerful than control. And in her presence, something inside him shifts. His edges begin to round, his guard lowers, and his breath deepens. At first, this change feels unfamiliar. He has learned to navigate life by structure, by reason, by predictable systems of logic and action. Softness, on the other hand, operates through intuition. It listens instead of instructs, it feels instead of analyzes. But the more time he spends in this energy, the more he begins to see that softness is not the absence of strength, it is the essence of balance. It is what allows the heart to remain open even when the world hardens. It is what gives courage depth, what gives discipline soul. In learning to be soft, he does not lose his strength, he discovers its truest form. Softness transforms him because it teaches him how to feel without collapsing. Before, his emotions were something to contain, to master. Anger, sadness, fear, all were categorized as disruptions to stability. But when he feels safe in connection, when he senses that he will not be judged for what he feels, he begins to let emotion move through him rather than against him. The strength he once used to suppress becomes the same strength that now allows him to surrender. In that surrender, he experiences release. He realizes that control is not mastery, awareness is. Softness gives him that awareness. When he opens himself to this softness, his entire energy begins to shift. His communication changes. He no longer speaks to defend, he speaks to connect. He no longer listens to respond, he listens to understand. The pauses in conversation that once felt uncomfortable now become moments of peace. The silence between words becomes as meaningful as the words themselves. Through softness, he learns the language of energy. The subtle exchange that happens beneath speech, the vibration that carries more truth than logic ever could. This transformation does not make him passive, it makes him conscious. The man who embraces softness becomes more deliberate, more aware of how his presence affects the world around him. He no longer confuses reaction with leadership. He understands that true authority comes not from dominance, but from emotional equilibrium. The softness that once frightened him becomes his anchor. It gives him composure that cannot be broken by circumstance because it is rooted in understanding, not control. Softness also redefines how he experiences love. Love is no longer something he seeks to possess or secure. It becomes something he allows to flow through him. He realizes that love is not a battle to be won, but a field to be nurtured. When he holds her, he is not trying to protect her from the world, he is sharing presence with her in it. When he looks at her, he does not see someone he must guard, he sees someone with whom he can unfold. This is the quiet power of softness. It removes the walls between beings, leaving only truth. As he softens, he also begins to see himself with new eyes. The harsh inner voice that once pushed him constantly begins to fade. In its place grows a quieter, kinder awareness, one that understands that self-compassion is not laziness but fuel for evolution. He begins to forgive himself more easily, to accept his flaws without shame, to recognize that imperfection is not failure but authenticity. Softness teaches him that growth does not always come through struggle. Sometimes it comes through allowing. Transformation through softness is not about becoming less masculine, it is about expanding the meaning of masculinity. It is the return to balance between doing and being, between strength and sensitivity. It is the realization that one can be powerful and gentle, disciplined and compassionate, protective and vulnerable at the same time. When he integrates softness into his being, he no longer feels split between strength and emotion. Both exist in harmony. His strength gains depth and his emotion gains direction. This transformation radiates outward. Others feel it in his presence. His energy becomes calmer, his voice steadier, his decisions more aligned. He no longer reacts from impulse or insecurity. His movements are deliberate, his words considered, his silence meaningful. This kind of energy influences without effort. It creates peace wherever it goes because it comes from peace within. Softness turns him into a mirror, one that reflects calm rather than chaos, awareness rather than reaction. There is an elegance in this transformation. It cannot be taught through lessons or forced through will. It must be felt. It arises through connection, through love, through the courage to surrender control and trust the intelligence of life. Every time he allows himself to feel without judgment, every time he chooses patience over pride, every time he responds with understanding instead of defense, the transformation deepens. He begins to embody wisdom, not the kind that comes from knowledge, but from presence. And as he continues to soften, he realizes that this softness is not fragile. It is not something to protect, it is something that protects him. It shields him not by resistance, but by resonance. When he stands in softness, nothing external can disturb his inner peace because he is no longer fighting the world, he is flowing with it. He becomes like water, adaptable, powerful, and calm. Softness, he learns, is not the opposite of strength. It is its purest form, the form that transforms not through force, but through awareness